1. This is my dad's story of the small time that he was an airman in the US Air Force, probably back in the early 1950s. He worked guard at an airbase up north with cold winters. He was positioned as a night guard that was guarding airplanes out next to the runway. Every night, with his jacket wrapped tightly around him, he got up and out to the runway. He patrolled up and down the runway, down the long line of airplanes. Armed with only a flashlight and a .45 caliber handgun, he was to challenge anyone he came across. Like anyone would actually want to be out in the cold weather. One night, his sergeant, who did not like my dad and kept him on the patrol shift, came out to check on him. My dad saw the sergeant approaching and could tell who it was in the bright moonlight. When the sergeant rounded the airplane, Dad called, "I'm here, Sergeant." What followed was a verbal lashing from the sergeant, of course getting more and more dramatic every time my dad told the story. The sergeant basically gave orders that my father was to challenge anyone who was out at the airplanes with a sharp, "Halt! Who goes there?" command. The sergeant warned that if my dad did not challenge him that exact way the next time, he would be in trouble and would have an even worse detail. My dad didn't like the idea of anything worse than walking a guard duty of planes in the middle of freezing weather, so he meant to do just that. Now, walking around all night meant a lot of boredom, and all he had to keep his mind occupied was a flashlight and the .45 caliber handgun. He started entertaining himself by learning to flip the flashlight in the air and catch it, flip it into his pocket, and basically several tricks with it. Next, he started practicing a quick draw with the .45, where in a split second he could draw the .45 halfway from the holster, turn it sideways, cock the slide, and get it out of the holster. Oh, to hear him tell it. He was like unto the Lone Ranger with the speed he improved to after about 2 weeks of practice. It wasn't too long after that he heard the sergeant out on the runway again, coming toward my dad. Cue malicious compliance. Now, my dad was not really a sneaky kind of man, but he made his way as quietly down the line of airplanes, closer and closer to the sergeant. He has made up in his mind what he's going to do. As soon as he got near the sergeant, he jumped out from behind the plane, his flashlight illuminating the person, and his immediately chambered .45 flashed out into his hand with a booming, "Halt! Who goes there?" But what the flashlight illuminated was not a slightly scared sergeant, but a lieutenant who was up and out early to check out his plane for an early morning mission, who, upon seeing the tenacity of the guard before him, and the .45 trained on him, immediately answered up, Whoa, Lieutenant Smith, I'm just checking out my bird, son. I got an early mission. You want to see the orders?" My dad immediately holstered the weapon and flipped his flashlight into his pocket and saluted, "Sorry, sir, but my orders are to challenge anyone who is found out here next to the planes at night." The lieutenant smiled and answered back, "Should know, son. Fine job. What's your name, airman? I'd like to tell your sergeant he has a hell of a guard out here." After good word got back to the sergeant, he had a little pity on my dad and let him swap out nights on the runway with 2 other guards, so he didn't have to be out there every night. 2. Back when I was in high school, must have been about 14 years old, every Wednesday afternoon we got to choose a sport, and we would all be bussed out to various locations to go have fun. There was plenty of shitty options, and a few that were very sought after, with the most popular choice being fishing, because we would mostly go to a wharf that also had a fish and chip shop that the teacher let us use. Most people would pick this sport to sit on the wharf and eat junk food and not actually fish at all, and with there being a pecking order in place on who gets first choice for choosing their sports selection, it took me years before I even got the opportunity to go fishing at school. I was a pretty keen fisherman at the time, spending a lot of my free time at rivers and beaches blissfully throwing a line in the water. I was over the moon and brought some of my more expensive gear and my flashy new rod and a cheap hand reel to use for spare lime. The teacher who took us out that day was an absolute pushover and couldn't care less about what was going on with us students. About 5 minutes after putting my line in the water, some kids my age showed up from a rival school. They were skipping class and started annoying us, teasing us, stealing food from some of the other students, and a barrage of other teenage antics. Me being scared of confrontation and built like a wet sponge, went to go and get the teacher to ask for some help getting the other kids to piss off and let us enjoy ourselves. He huffed and puffed, but eventually came over to where they were harassing us, and in a half-assed sentence said, "Stop annoying Nitrous, he wants to catch a fish." This fueled the fire unsurprisingly, and they ramped up their game tenfold. They got on my face and started mocking me. Then one of them had the bright idea, and they kicked my handrail into the water. Before I could do anything, they scampered away and hid under the wharf. I shed a tear, but didn't have the guts to say anything to them. I walked over to let the teacher know what had happened, and he unsurprisingly said, "Well, you need to be more careful with your belongings." And that was that. Being a hot summer day, those annoying kids began to swim underneath the dock. It was a rocky, oystery mess under there, but whatever, and were giggling like mad, but I tried my best to ignore them. I want to catch a fish. One of the other kids who was fishing a few meters away from me called out and said, "Oh man, I had a fish but it got away and it snapped the whole line." That sucks, but it doesn't affect me. I'm a professional. I had expensive braided line that was quite hard to break. A few minutes later, a kid on the other side had the same thing happen to them. And then, seconds after that, I felt a big tug and boom, my line snapped. I thought to myself, that's weird, because there's only small fish in there, nothing big enough to break a line. That's when I saw one of the kids from earlier peek out from underneath the wharf with a small pair of scissors, and it all made sense. I went and tried to sob to the teacher, who in no uncertain terms told me to stop bothering him and ask the kids myself to leave me alone. Yeah, I'm sure that will work. They had been cutting our lines, and I knew I had to do something about it. I got into my tackle box and found my strongest line, a meter-long stainless steel leader line, almost impossible to break, cut, or snap, and a nice fat hook. I took off a few meters of line, attached that to the steel ladder, and then tightly secured the hook to the end. I finished off my crude invention and tied that off to the line of my rod. I felt like MacGyver. The plan was in motion. There was no turning back now. I played dumb and poked my head underneath the dock to tell them to please leave our lines alone, hoping they'd give enough courage to go through with it. And before I could even say anything, I got splashed by a big barrage of water from them. I yelled out from the top of the wharf, "Please, guys, I really want to catch a fish." With a bit of razzle-dazzle, so it appeared, I was still attempting to catch something. I put a very mushy prawn on the line that would fall if you looked at it the wrong way, and dropped my line into the water. It took only 30 seconds before I felt that faithful tug, and knowing they wouldn't be able to cut that line with a swift motion, I tugged back. Hard. As is standard when fishing, take it from me. I heard someone let out a big scream, and with a quick motion got the line nice and tangled around a nail sticking out of the wharf, under the guise of trying to do something to help. Within seconds, the pushover teacher came over. Guess he changed his tune now that it sounded like someone was getting murdered under his guard, and we both looked over the edge to see a kid with a nice juicy hook embedded in his hand, screaming like a banshee. I used my pudgy appearance and couldn't hurt a fly demeanor to my advantage, and looked over at the teacher to say, "I'm not sure what happened. I was just trying to catch a fish." It took him a solid minute to get the line disconnected and set the kid loose, in which I was able to pack up my gear and get ready to leave. And the commotion of 30 students coming to see what on earth was going on was spectacular. No one seemed to have any suspicion that this could have been a purposeful act of vengeance. From what I heard, the man-sized fish I caught had to go to hospital to get the hook removed, and became known as fish fingers for quite some time after that. It's a shame I didn't get to hook something to eat that day, but nothing tastes sweeter than revenge. 3. This happened a few years ago when I was working on a Navy base as a civilian at a club. I was originally hired to be a prep cook, but shortly after I was hired, the 2 dishwashers were too busy fucking around and playing grab-ass temporarily with each other, so my supervisor asked me to, temporarily, help in the dish pit. I did not mind since I was making the same pay rate that a cook would make, and honestly I enjoyed it more. So fast forward about 6 months or so, and one of the dishwashers became pregnant, and used it to her advantage, saying things like,
The soap chemicals are making me sick,
etc. So she got moved to the prep cook spot, and I remained as the dishwasher. Still not an issue, I rather enjoyed it. Then right after the Christmas holiday, the other dishwasher got a hair up his ass that he was going to move to California and write screenplays, so he quit. And left me being the only dishwasher, not really bad considering the facility I was working in was events and catering, so we did not have massive amounts of business all the time. Again, this was not really any problem. I could easily handle everything, and the few times that it got super crazy, my boss would push me aside and tell me to put the dishes away, she would wash them. This worked well for about a year. Then came January. The boss's FWB comes to me and says,
"You have to start towel drying the dishes."
The PMI, Preventative Medicine Inspectors,
had come in and inspected in December and said that we had to start towel drying the dishes.
The funny thing about this was that we got inspected monthly, and a copy of the report was always put in the kitchen office, so we could read it, but when I went to look for December's report, it was not there. I mentioned this to my supervisor, and she just parroted what her FWB said. When I asked where the report was so I could read it, she told me that it's around here somewhere, I just haven't put it up yet. So of course I smelled bullshit, and proceeded to do what I did in the past, wash the dishes in the machine and let them air dry, then put them away. A few months later, it was time for all of us to get recertified. This happened yearly, and at the end of the class, the PMI, who was running it, asked if anyone had any questions, so of course, I asked them point blank about what the boss's FWB told me. That is not the case. We would never say that it goes against the NAVSH, what they refer to as their Bible, all the naval health regs. I pointed to the boss's FWB and said, "Him." No sooner did I get outside and start heading home, than do I get a call from my boss asking me why I'm causing trouble. "You know very well they told us that," to which I responded, "If they did say that, they were wrong for doing so because the PMI told me that it is illegal and that they will be coming to speak with you about this." So the next couple of months were rather awkward. Both boss and boss's FWB kept trying to tell me to towel dry the dishes and put them away, which I did not do. Now for the malicious compliance. One day I was working when a PMI comes in to do the monthly inspection. So I make a big show of running the dishes in the machine, then grabbing a towel that was wet, and started to dry the dishes. Of course, the PMI took notice and asked me what I was doing. My response was, according to boss and FWB, someone in your office told them that we were to start doing this. That, of course, went over really well. And he told me not to continue to do that considering it was against regs, and later came to find out OSHA rules as well. The fallout, so to speak, was that the facility got their asses handed to them via the PMIs who have the power to shut the kitchen down. But oddly enough, my boss and her FWB continued to insist that we towel dry the dishes, saying that they did not dry fast enough, and they leave water spots on the glasses, etc. I had been after them for years to get the dishwasher replaced, considering it was 30 years old at the time, and even the company that it was leased from stated they could no longer order parts for it. When I finally left after 10 years in the place, nothing had been changed in the dish pit. The towel dry order was still being touted despite the fact that they all knew that they were not supposed to. 4. I was 18 and worked at a gas station. I was the type of employee that you could always rely on to cover someone else's shift. People would text me directly, and I would let the manager know when I showed up I was covering for so-and-so. I also owned a 50cc scooter to get to work since it was nearby. One night I'm riding my scooter, hit a pothole, and hit pavement. Immediate pain. My face jumps out at me first. It feels like half the road now lives in the left side of my face. I try to sit up, feeling various scrapes, and realize my boob is stuck to my bra. Passerby calls an ambulance. The EMTs think I somehow got third-degree burn in my boob when I try to pull down my shirt. I take it off, and they see all of my skin scraped into my bra. It's excruciating. I go to the hospital, mostly because my helmet was actually a bicycle helmet. I didn't know it came with the scooter, and they're worried about a concussion. They have to keep me up until I get checked out by the doctor, who isn't there yet. I realize around 1 a.m. that I'm not fit for work in the morning. Not wanting to wake up my bosses, I call the store and talk to the overnight employee. I tell them to tell the manager when they come in that I can't come in, and will drop off a doctor's note when I can. Around 6 a.m. I'm allowed to go home, drugged up but concussion-free. When I get home, I think I might try to start ungraveling. I go to the bathroom and strip. I'm covered in scrapes and bruises. I have a giant bandage taped over my left boob that goes up to my collarbone. My face looks like someone glued gravel with red glue, and it got close enough to cause a black eye. I say fuck it. Throw on a comfy tank and some shorts, trying my best not to have fabric over anything uncomfortable. I've been awake 24 plus hours. I'll deal with the carnage after I sleep. 2 hours later, I wake up to my mom screaming. I come out and she thrusts the phone at me. My assistant manager is now screaming at me. She said I can't tell another employee I'm calling out. I should have called her. She said if I wasn't there in 15 minutes, I was fired. She had a spa day with her mom planned and was not cancelling to cover my shift. I hang up and ask my mom, what the fuck? Apparently, I didn't hear my phone and she answered recognizing my assistant manager's name. She planned on explaining my accident. When she answered, the assistant manager assumed it was me and immediately started yelling the same as above. My mom got heated, yelling she was in an accident. How dare you, instead of asking if she was okay? She could be dead, and you're yelling? So I told my mom she wants me there in 15 minutes. What say you drive me up there, I grab my doctor's note and we're off. I walk in the building like shit on a stick. Despite having multiple pairs, I wear my broken glasses. Unintentionally realize as I walk down the length of the store, I've developed a limp due to my left side being fucked. I didn't brush my hair. It's a wild mane that replaces my normally neat ponytail. Every minor abrasion on full display. The chest bandage clearly outlined in my tight tank. I see both manager and assistant as they see me. I lock eyes with the assistant and stare her down as I close the distance. My manager stutters out the question of, what am I doing there? I turn my attention to him. Assistant manager said if I wasn't here in 15 minutes, I was fired. I'm here, so do I still have my job? After he assured me that of course I did, and to go home and rest, I give him my doctor's note with the hand that's injured from wrist to halfway down my pinky. I turn to the assistant. I told the overnight person I'd bring in my doctor's note. Next time, though, I'll be sure to call you at 1 a.m. if need to, right? Seeing the looks exchanged between the two, what I knew had been confirmed. Her calling me was her doing, and my manager didn't know what was happening. I'm sorry about your spa day. If you'll excuse me, they didn't let me sleep until my x-rays came back. I'm exhausted. I left feeling as good as you can feel with road rash. 5. Some background before we start. I worked as a drone pilot and mine surveyor for a man-child, using drones to take pictures of the mines, creating a 3D model out of those pictures, and then calculating all sorts of goodies for the clients, like their gold yield and the amount of shit they have to move, etc. It's really technical and easily go completely to shit if you don't know what you're doing. And even if you know what you're doing, it can still very easily go to complete shit. I'm licensed and certified. I've been playing the game for a long-ass time now, and I know how it works most of the time. My ex-boss, on the other hand, didn't. See, he got his surveyor's license during the 80s by complete chance. He was a simple miner who just happened to be in the right place at the right time, getting a free university scholarship to become a surveyor because they had a few grants left over and called out who wanted it. His hand was one of the ones they picked. The second he got his license, he quit his job and convinced an old retiree surveyor to throw in his retirement, all cards on the table, to start up their own surveying business. He spent the entire time at the golf course and the bar, making a fat amount of cash out of his newly founded self-milking cash cow. Not once did he carry out an actual survey. Hell, I doubt he's even stepped foot on a mine since then. He just invoiced the clients, told the retiree where to go, and collected a paycheck. So the time moves on. Work slowly filters in, and as one does when they reach the ripe old age of 80-something, the retiree decides fuck this and kicks the bucket. My boss's cash cow just died on him, and no matter how hard he squeezed the teats, the only thing coming out of it now was dust. The only other employee was this other guy who acted as his assistant and basically just carried heavy shit for him. He didn't have a backup. So of course he hired me. I was pretty fresh into the game at the time, starving and basically homeless, and in my eyes this guardian angel just descended from the heavens and offered me a way out that doesn't involve an ungodly amount of Xanax and a short rope. He basically told me that we have to survey X site and get the data off to X client. Didn't tell me how, didn't tell me what data exactly they want, hell, he didn't even tell me when they needed it by. He just pointed to the place on Google, told me to go there and get it done. Somehow I did it. By the skin of my left testy, I scraped by and eventually figured out just what the fuck to do. At some point, we were kicked off the mine for reasons that my boss didn't disclose to me, and had to open up our own offices. My boss graciously dug deep into his pockets, kicked out his eldest son, and dedicated that room in his house for our use. Now I was spending every day with the man, since if he wasn't at the golf course, he was at home. We started butting heads. He had this illusion in his head of how things work and how you're supposed to do things, and I had practical experience and qualifications to tell me otherwise. Every single day was a fight, and every single day he'd tell me how he wanted it to be done, and I just turn around and do it the way it's meant to be done. I started passing out my CV like herpes at a frat party. My timing was perfect, though, because a little blip and crash of the 2020 job economy happened right as I started searching. The interviews I had lined up all got cancelled. The people who I already interviewed with, and who seemed ecstatic to have me, suddenly didn't answer my calls. I felt like a scorned lover waiting on the curb in the rain, underwear clinging to my butt cheeks, and my socks soaking wet. I was considering maybe going back to IT or even better, prostitution. I could maybe make $1 each. And thanks to a well-used childhood spent chewing gum, I knew I had the jaw muscles for it. I felt hopeless and dejected, doomed to a life of taking care of a disgusting man-child and his fat wallet. Eventually, though, a second angel descended from the heavens once again, saving me from that seductive little noose. I checked her wings for wires and asked her to do an STD check before we carried on, and she checked out. Finally, I could fucking leave this place. I was waiting on the contract, not really willing to commit to anything without it being in writing, when my boss and I got into another massive screaming fight. After about hour 3, something inside me snapped. "You want it done your way? Fucking fine. I'll do it your way." I committed hard to following his procedure every step of the way. Surveys were taking 3 times longer to do. The drone crashed 4 times, my first ever crash, and all of them were near write-offs. The 3D models stopped looking like mines and started resembling potato chips and Twizzlers. He had clients calling him day and night non-stop, asking him what the fuck he's doing. Eventually, he gave my number to them so they can call me directly, and I started getting calls day and night non-stop, until I just turned off my phone outside office hours. Clients were threatening to drop the contracts. Clients were threatening to sue. My contract came in from my new company, and I signed the dotted line with a smile on my face. One client stopped calling and stopped paying. Word got out, as it always does, that his company is just some redneck hoo-ha being run out of someone's home. Another client cancelled the contract completely and threatened legal action. I handed in my resignation. My boss looked at me pleadingly, offering me a fuckton of cash to stay. If cocaine could make you feel even half as good as I felt then, sign me up. I told him to get fucked. He begged me to write him a manual on how to do the work, to show him how to process the data, to fly the pits, to set up the instruments. I spent the last 2 weeks there writing out every procedure he ever told me I needed to follow, sent it through to him, and walked away. A few weeks later, when he was scheduled to do a survey, I was suddenly spammed with calls and email messages from him, asking me how to do this or fly that, or where to find this data. His manual wasn't working, surprise, surprise. I don't know, just read the manual. My new company is currently picking up all the contracts he's dropped. If we manage to get the last one, I'm gonna ask them for a bonus. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 61. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. I was thinking, as I was actually recording this video, I was saying to the chat there, I need to make a little time this weekend and finish off my spinning plates merchandise design. I've got the little waiter guy drawn out, well, I've got him sketched out. I quite like the shape, and I kind of like the art style I was going for. I'm not quite sure what you call it, but I want to say retro, minimalist retro, because I'm an artiste, and I'm not sure if I'm going to color it in. It might look better if it's just actually, in black or white, depending on the design it's on. But essentially, it's a little waiter person, and they're kind of balancing on one leg, and they're holding like 2 plates. And they're also balancing one on their foot, and things are falling off the plates. I just need to do that, and maybe add a little text to it. But, yeah, well, that's a little project to work on at the weekend. Otherwise, I'd just be playing video games. And when I try to play Phasmophobia on my own, it's not as fun. Too spoopy. Anyway. Oh, although, I believe, hang on. Date. It is Halloween this weekend. So we will be playing spoopy games. I might actually start the stream a little earlier. Yeah, I'll probably start the stream a little earlier, because it's Saturday, and I should be all wrapped up by Saturday. Okay, with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening. And take very good care of yourself.